Welcome to Turning Point. Our special guest today is the notoriously independent Congressman Peter King. Welcome, Congressman.
Frank, great to be here.
Let's get right into your history. Early childhood, you grew up in Queens?
Yeah, I grew up in Sunnyside in Queens. My father was a New York City police officer. I had a brother and a sister. My mother was a homemaker. We lived in a small apartment, typically Irish neighborhood at the time. I was 2 doors down from the Celtic Cafe, a block and a half away from Lynch's funeral home, across the street from a church, block and a half from Sunnyside Gardens, the old fight club. And we had a German delicatessen. There was a Jewish candy store, a Chinese laundry. It was like right out of 1940s and 1950s ethnic New York.
Yeah, well, and then you moved out to Nassau County.
Yeah, I moved to Nassau when it was my early 20s. I was actually in law school. My parents moved out here. And then I got married. I actually lived in Great Neck for a couple of years, from 68 to 1970, 71. And I've been living in Seaford in the same house since August of 71.
By the way, for those who don't know, these are all Long Island, right, Seaford and Great Neck. You got into politics the first time running for council. Am I right?
Yeah, I had actually been involved in Republican politics for about 7 years before that. On Long Island, in Nassau County especially, we have a strong Republican organization. So I was a committeeman, I was a local executive leader, I was a club president. I had worked in county government. I was a special assistant to the county executive. And then I got caught in a big political fight, ended up getting pretty much fired. I was out of work on the day of my, I guess it was 9th wedding anniversary. My wife said, what kind of a guy did I marry? You get fired on a wedding anniversary. My father, I made the front page of Newsday, and my father said, you're the first guy in the family to get the front page of a newspaper, and it's for getting fired. What kind of a son did I raise? But
what, was it you on the front cover, or was it a bunch of people?
It was a bunch of people. And actually, technically, I wasn't fired, but I was pushed out. 2 guys were fired. I got pushed out. It was a long, complicated story, but I was out of work. And but anyway, it worked out fine. I ended up being counsel to the Off-Track Betting Corporation, and I got nominated for councilman. I was councilman elected in 77, councilman to 81. Then I got elected county controller. I was county controller of Nassau from 1981 to 1992, and I've been in Congress ever since. Now, there was one big, not roadblock, but moment along the way. Everyone thinks you have these smooth, easy careers. In 1986, I ran for New York State Attorney General and lost to Bob Abrams by 1.2 million votes. Now, you have to work hard to lose by over 1 million votes. I would drive through neighborhoods in the city to this day in New York City. They beat me 9-1. They beat me 10-1. Not that I remember this stuff,
You never lost in Congress. When did you first get elected to Congress?
1992. First race was a tough race. I was outspent 4-1. And I lucked out to this extent. The guy I was running against, he was from Long Island, but he had moved away years ago. So he was not familiar with the terrain, but he had a load of money. And his polling 3 weeks out showed he couldn't lose. I had saved all my money for the final 2 weeks. And so as he was pretty much taking himself out of it, I spent all the money, TV ads, and we found out he hadn't voted in about 20 different elections. So I was able to really go on offense against him, and I ended up winning 49% to 46%, 124,000 to 116,000.
It was an independent in the race, or some kind of third party, right?
What happened was there was not an independence party that year. There was a Right to Life candidate. And even though I'm pro-life, there was a fight going on there between the Nassau Republicans and the Right to Life Party. So they ran their own candidate against me. So I lost about 4% of the vote. And then there was a socialist candidate, a Liberal Party candidate. So it was, but anyway, probably what hurt the most was the Right to Life candidate draining off about 3 or 4%.
Oh, that's directly off of you. That's
directly off me, totally, yeah.
Well, let me ask you, going back just a little bit, who mentored you? Who got you first involved in politics?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've loved it since I was a kid. Don't ask me why. I mean, my main goal was to be a ball player with the Brooklyn Dodgers. I saw myself coming in relief in the 9th inning and striking out Mickey Mantle. I had all these images in the 7th game of the World Series. Never made it. I made the final cut of the baseball team. That was it. A guy had a grand slam homer off me in an inter-squad game. John Dockery. He ended up playing for the Jets and the Red Sox farm system.
He went into broadcasting, right?
Yeah, that's the guy, John Dockery. So I always said I made his career, But no, I just, for some reason, loved the combat of politics. Went to law school. Never that crazy about practicing law. I just...
Notre Dame Law School.
Yeah, Notre Dame Law. I went to St. Francis College in Brooklyn. I worked pretty much full time my last 2 years in college at St. Francis. Went to college full time. Carried a union card, Brotherhood of Railway and Steamship Clerks, freight handlers and station employees. I worked at the West Side Freight Yards. And anyway, I just got into it. I moved to Nassau County, joined the local Republican club, And things happened, and I ended up becoming the Republican leader in Seaford, which in Nassau County is a big thing. That puts you on the executive committee. And Joe Margiotta was the county chairman at the time. And occasionally Joe Margiotta and I would have some differences, but having said that, he was really a strong, strong leader, and he showed me how really to get things done. And then Al D'Amato, the reason I got nominated for councilman is that Al D'Amato was running for presiding supervisor that year in the town of Hempstead, and there was a vacancy on the town board. And actually, Joe Margiotta wanted somebody else, but Al D'Amato wanted me running, and D'Amato won out, and so it's really been great ever since.
Yeah, not bad. So Margiotta is someone who's been studied. I mean, he's a local leader here. Late Joe Margiotta was a local leader in Nassau County, but also he's been studied in political classes all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Margiotta ran a very tough organization, but we had 2,000 committeemen, we had 65 different areas, and everyone had to account for votes. There was a patronage system, there's no doubt about that.
Did everyone have to give 10% of their income to the Republican Party?
No, they say you had to pay 1%. It was voluntary. Some did, some didn't. But you were expected, if you were part of the organization, to help out. That was basically it. I never knew anyone that got fired or anything else, but it certainly helped if you were cooperative. But everything was done above board. Everything was by check. There was no cash went back and forth. And Margiotta recruited pretty good people. I mean, at one time, we had the chief judge of the Court of Appeals in Nassau County. We had the Senate Majority Leader, Ralph Marino. We had Al D'Amato, United States Senator. I was a U.S. Congressman. I mean, and before that, we had Norman Lent, Ray McGrath. These are all U.S. congressmen coming out of Nassau County. So it worked. Did it measure up maybe to what the New York Times or the Harvard political science classes wanted? No. But it got the job done. And I actually wrote, before I ever met Joe Margiotta, I actually wrote a thesis when I was in college defending Jimmy Walker and Tammany Hall. Now, Jimmy Walker was considered corrupt. Tammany Hall had its problems. But the fact is, in those neighborhoods in New York where Tammany Hall was strong, the garbage was picked up, people got jobs, and because the local political people were responsive, they knew what was on people's minds. They weren't sitting in an ivory tower. They weren't sitting at an editorial board. They were out there. So if they're going around getting a petition signed, if a person's going to sign a petition, they're going to tell you, hey, the garbage isn't picked up. Hey, the street's dirty. Hey, there's kids hanging out in the street corner at night. And that guy would then go to the local elected official and take care of it. So I find that actually organization politics is much more responsive to the real needs of people.
When we come back with Congressman Peter King, we are going to discuss some of the controversial statements, and issues, and stances that you've taken. And some of them are very interesting. We'll be right back.
You have a story that hits, it really hits. The only bad part is, no matter how good story it is, it has a 48-hour life cycle today. I mean, on a very serious note, I would say most Americans forgot about the Navy SEALs who were killed in Afghanistan. That would have been on people's minds for a month.
Turning Point is brought to you by PC Wealth Management of Morgan Stanley Smith Barney and the law firm of Duffy & Duffy, protecting the victims of medical error.
We're back with Congressman Peter King from the 3rd Congressional District in New York. Congressman, of all things, let me ask you about the death of Michael Jackson. About 8 days after the death of Michael Jackson, you came out with what Newsday called, or they considered, an Iranian hostage-type video. 2 minutes, I think. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, it was July of actually died in June of 2009. It was the day after the 4th of July, and I've been at 4th of July parades the day before, seeing returning veterans, people who put their lives on the line for their country. And it hit me that for 7-8 days, all we're hearing about is Michael Jackson. Listen, the guy was an artist, the guy was a musician, he was a dancer. But the fact is, this guy also was a pervert. This is, he was sleeping with young boys, and to be glorifying him, this was going on and on. It just got to me. So I was coming back from the gym on Sunday morning. I gave Ann Rosenfeld on my staff, I gave her a call. I said, I got to say something about Michael Jackson. She shows up with a cheap video camera. I'm standing outside the 1-2 American Legion Hall in Nassau County, and I just went into a 2-minute rant about Michael Jackson. How this was terrible, that he was getting all this publicity. People are dying for their country. We're a great country, and we're spending all our time talking about a guy who was a child molester. And so anyway, Ann was on the way to the beach with her kids. She sent the video off to Kevin Fogarty and my staff in Washington. He emailed it around. I didn't hear a word about it. And apparently that evening, TMZ or somebody picked it up. I got a couple of phone calls. went to bed, woke up the next morning, it was all over, it was like the lead story on all the national news shows. My phone was ringing off the hook, getting calls from Germany, Britain, everywhere. And it was interesting. Every reporter, just about every reporter I spoke to that morning, and you said Newsday called it an Iranian, they were ridiculing it as an Iranian hostage video, which is actually pretty accurate the way it looked. There was nothing scientific about this at all. And then I was finding literally every person I was speaking to on the ground, taking the plane to Washington, everyone was saying, you're right, you're 100% right, Sicko, you're the only guy who's saying this. I went to Iraq the next month, and I had soldiers stopping me. Hey, you're the guy that said that about Michael Jackson. You're the guy that said it straight. There's a larger message here. One is that the popular media, the popular culture, is really, I think, in many ways out of touch with real Americans. Even Pat Buchanan, who's a friend of mine, he was on the Morning Joe show, and he said, well, this ends any chances Peter King ever has of running for higher office because I was taking on such a popular icon. I saw a poll later on, I think it was like 80-something% of the people agreed to what I was saying. And so I think we, in politics, and you're in politics too, Frank, we always have to keep in mind that we could be in our own circles and everyone's saying one thing or another, or the media is saying one thing. We all act very sophisticated. We think we are. But real people have a much better direction, much better sense of where we should be going as a country. And I think that proves it in that case.
Did you do any type of polling on name recognition before and after that?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't do polling. Well, I put it this way. My poll numbers from 08 to 010, which I did my own next poll, yeah, my name ID had gone up considerably. I think Michael Jackson was probably part of the reason for that, yeah.
Now, a lot of this, I mean, you've been in Congress for almost 2 decades. You were before the 24-hour news cycle and after the 24-hour news cycle. This is a product of the 24-hour news cycle. I mean, in many ways, if this happened 20 years ago, it wouldn't have the same effect.
No, it wouldn't have, and you wouldn't have been able to get it out. I would have had to call a formal news conference, and who's going to really show up on a Sunday morning after the 4th of July to hear me talk about Michael Jackson? Then you would hope maybe an Associated Press reporter would have picked it up, sent it somewhere, but they wouldn't have had any video of me, any audio. Instead, now, even though it was, again, unprofessionally done, even though Ann does a great job, but she grabbed the camera out of her closet to take this thing.
Ann is a staffer.
She went to my district office, and she was not overly happy that morning because she was going to Jones Beach with the kids, and I'm asking her to detour to take a picture of me ranting on the lawn of the Once for American Legion Hall. But now we had access. Just Ann taking that 2-minute video, emailing it to Kevin Fogarty in my Washington office, Kevin coming in, emailing. It took him 5 minutes to email it to all the media outlets in the country and went home. And that was it. Based on that, I was able to get worldwide coverage. That couldn't have happened 20 years. It couldn't have happened 10 years ago. And that's how the new media has really changed things. The good part about that is if you have a story that hits, it really hits. The only bad part is no matter how good story it is, it has a 48-hour life cycle today. I mean, on a very serious note, I would say most Americans forgot about the Navy SEALs who were killed in Afghanistan. That would have been on people's minds for a month. But the plane went down, and you had 30 people killed, 22 SEALs. And yet, within 72 hours, it was almost forgotten because there's always another story out there.
Just recently, you've had some controversy with the Muslim screenings or the hearings.
Right.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. There was probably nobody on Long Island in politics who was closer to the Muslim community than I was. The first trip I took as a member of Congress, I went to, not some exotic place, I went to Bosnia and Croatia to meet with the Muslim community, which was being besieged by the Serbs. I was one of the only Republicans who voted yes when President Clinton sent troops into Bosnia. And I went to Sarajevo for peace talks back in 1996, and I supported the attacks against the Serbs who were attacking the Muslims in Kosovo. And these are unpopular issues. So I've been very close to the Muslim community. I went to the mosque in Westbury a number of times. I went to weddings of family members up there. I went to their homes. I was the most surprised person in the world after September 11th, seeing leaders of the Muslim community say that it could have been the CIA, it could have been the Jews, it could have been the FBI, refusing to acknowledge what al-Qaeda had done. And then as I got closer to it, working with police, working with the FBI, working with anti-terror forces, realizing that even though the overwhelming majority of Muslims are outstanding Americans, al-Qaeda was attempting to recruit in the Muslim community. Just like, and to me, just like when the FBI wanted to find who the Westies were, they went to Irish bars, not to Ben's Kosher Deli. If you want to find the Ku Klux Klan, you don't go to Harlem. If you're looking for Black Panthers, you don't go to Mississippi. I mean, you go where the logical evidence would be. So to me, we should be looking at what's happening in the Muslim community. This isn't just me saying this. The White House has said Al-Qaeda is recruiting in the community. And from my experience in dealing with police locally, state, and national, the Muslim leadership, the Muslim community does not sufficiently cooperate. We've had examples here in Nassau County of people who have been involved in terrorism. Mosques never told anyone about it at all until it was too late. So I thought these would be very legitimate hearings. As chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, if even the White House is saying this is a #1 threat to the country, I would investigate the radicalization of the community. Instead, it was made out that I was anti-Muslim, I was a bigot, I was persecuting a minority in this country. And so, again, I don't think one mainstream show gave me, they all attacked me. It was across the board. It was like unanimous. The New York Times had 4 editorials, 2 front-page stories. I saw a poll come out recently. Nationwide, 63-20 people support me continuing these hearings. That's 63% to 20%, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of the national media opposed what I was doing.
On that note, we'll be back right after this with Congressman Peter King.
Interestingly, it was not so much tense, but it was really a great moment was on the day that bin Laden was killed. I'd actually been out that day. I go to boxing matches in Nassau County, and I put my phone on vibrate because I was supposed to say something in the boxing match. At the moment, I forgot to take it off vibrate. So about 10 after 10, I look at my phone, I see it's blinking.
Turning Point with Frank MacKay is brought to you by Atlantic Honda, New York's auto giant, and Herman Katz, Kangemi & Klein, property tax attorneys and advisors.
We're back with Congressman Peter King. Congressman, let me ask you about being in the majority and being in the minority. To the rest of us, what are the differences?
Yeah, to the average person, I can see why they wouldn't realize what a tremendous difference is. The majority party controls everything. The majority party decides what you're going to vote on, when you're going to vote on it, how you're going to vote on it, what the amendments are going to be. All of that is determined by the majority party. Now, actually, almost have to have a system like that. Otherwise, we have chaos. It would be like some of these European countries where you have 10 different parties and people going in different directions. But if you're the majority, for instance, as the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, because I'm in the majority, I was able to set these hearings on Islamic radicalization. If I was the minority, I wouldn't be able to do that at all. But whether it's the budget, whether it's taxes, anything at all, the majority party sets the tone for the debate, sets the agenda for the debate.
Let me ask you, what was the turning point in your congressional career?
If you had asked me over 10 years ago, I would have said being involved in the Irish peace process, working with Bill Clinton to bring that about, all that becomes insignificant after September 11th. September 11th really changed my whole way of looking at Congress, looking at the country, and looking at the world. Because I realized whatever debates we have on budget issues, healthcare issues, education issues, all of which are important, if we don't survive as a nation, it doesn't matter. And having seen what we saw on September 11th, where so many people from the New York, Long Island area were murdered that day, the impact it had on the country, I basically decided that so long as I was in Congress, my main focus and priority was to fight Islamic terrorism, to protect our country. And I never wanted to be in a position again where if something did happen, people would come and say, why didn't you do more? How come you let this happen? And then it worked out that a Committee on Homeland Security was set up. The person who was picked as the first chairman ended up being nominated to run the Securities and Exchange Commission. There was an opening. There were, I believe, 5 people ahead of me. I ran for it. We had an internal party fight, and I was elected chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. So I would say that whole coming together of September 11th, and then 4 years later, me being elected chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, that's going to define, for better or worse, what I do in Congress, and really, what I can do as far as performing a service for the American people.
In that position, you're privy to information that we're not. Anything you could share with us that was a frightening close call?
Actually, besides being on the Homeland Security Committee, I'm on the Intelligence Committee. I'm the only member of the House and Senate who's on both committees. So I'm able to look at intelligence from the outside in and the inside out. I would say that probably the most tense moments have come when we're following a plot that's overseas. Well, basically somebody who leaves the United States, goes overseas, and we know they're coming back. And we're able to follow them, and all of a sudden they're not on the radar screen. Now, you don't know, that could mean several things. One, we could have been wrong in the first place. There never was a plot. It could mean that the plot was called off. It could mean the person got killed overseas. Or it could mean they're back in the country and we don't know about it. Watching those plots unfold. But I would say probably the tensest moments came when I got a call from Secretary Chertoff, who was the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. I was actually out east with Rudy Giuliani and my family, and I got a call that evening that I had to go to a secure phone as soon as possible. And I called back Mike Chertoff, who was the Secretary of Homeland Security, and he told me that there was a liquid explosive plot coming out of London. There were going to be 10 jetliners coming to the United States, and they were going to explode over the Atlantic, and this could have been thousands of people being killed. And they were heading it off, and they hoped to make the arrest that morning. I actually had a family member who was in Europe. We were told not to tell anyone what was happening, and that was a little tense, knowing I had someone who was there, and I knew that all the airports were going to be shut down. I couldn't advise anyone. That was tense. And then also, when they did stop the plot, again, for the next day or so, you're not certain, did you get everyone? Or were there several that were still operational? I would say that was a long night waiting for that. And then also, interestingly, it was not so much tense, but it was really a great moment was on the day that bin Laden was killed. I'd actually been out that day. I go to boxing matches in Nassau County, and I put my phone on vibrate because I was supposed to say something in the boxing match. When I come home, I forgot to take it off vibrate. So about 10 after 10, I look at my phone, I see it's blinking. And I go to voicemail, and I'm getting a call from the director of National Counterterrorism Center telling me he's calling me from the White House. And he never works out of the White House. He said, I have an important message for you. If you get this call this number immediately. If not, be sure to watch the president on television tonight. There's going to be an announcement that's very significant to your district. My first instinct was they stopped somebody coming across the border with a bomb or with weapons. Bin Laden was the furthest thing from my mind. So I called this number, and it rings about 10 or 12 times. I said to my wife, I guess the guy's gone home. It can't be that important. Fortunately, I stayed on the line. Person picks it up and says, White House Situation Room. And you know, that's the room down below where they're all, wow. And I said, I'm calling for Director Leiter. And at one moment, they put him on, and he told me that we had killed bin Laden, and the president was going to announce it in about an hour and a half. When I heard it, it took me about a second. First, I thought he maybe meant Gaddafi. It just didn't register for about 2 seconds. Now, 2 seconds isn't a long time, but it is when you're talking about bin Laden being killed. And I turned to my wife and said, my God, they killed bin Laden. It was just, and also on a parenthetical note there, people say that more members of Congress should be briefed on it. I mean, I was not told about it till that night that he was killed. There was only, I think, 4 members of Congress who had been briefed early on that there was actually, we were going after him. They called me, I think, 12 members of Congress to give us advance notice that he'd been killed. Within 15 minutes, I'm watching television and news stations are reporting. So just of that small number of 12 who are considered highly trusted, you know that someone leaked it out to the media. And the president didn't want that out. They did not want that out at all because we had other things we had to get in place before we announced it, including arrangements with Pakistan and other countries. So I guess I went off on a side note to show that I have no real problem with keeping certain things really secret for as long as you can.
That's amazing. On that note, we'll be back with the final 2 minutes of Congressman Peter King.
I'm very content being in Congress. I mean, listen, I've thought of running for the U.S. Senate. Actually, Joe Mandello even mentioned my name for running for the presidential nomination.
The Turning Point is brought to you by Smith DeGroat Real Estate, serving the tri-state area since 1955, and CAI, Insurance Solutions since 1961. On the web at www.conferenceny.com.
We're back for our final 2 minutes with Congressman Peter King. Congressman, where do you go from here?
I'm very content being in Congress. I mean, listen, I've thought of running for the U.S. Senate. Actually, Joe Mandello even mentioned my name for running for the presidential nomination. But as a Republican to run in a Democratic state like New York, I would need at least $40–50 million to run for the Senate. I have to give up my House seat to do it. I can get an awful lot done in the House. I think I have so far. And coming back as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee for another 2 years, if I'm lucky enough to get reelected, that to me is more than I ever thought I'd be doing. I'm very happy with that.
It's not a free run. You run the same year as Congress. Yeah,
if I run for the Senate, or if I ran for president, but certainly if I ran for the Senate, I would have to give up the seat in Congress. And to me, I don't mind taking risks, but the fact, not only would I have to give up the seat, I'd have to spend 2 years doing nothing but raising money. And I wouldn't really be able to get my job done as a congressman. Again, $40–50 million at least to run in New York State, especially it'd be a presidential year against an incumbent Democrat. Take an awful lot of money, awful lot of time. I can get a lot more done, I believe, as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee.
Congressman, thanks for being with us. Thanks for the information, and we'd like to have you back anytime.
Frank, thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for being here with Turning Point with Frank MacKay. And our special guest today was Congressman Peter King. Thank you.